Welcome to Preeminent Test Prep. Today is day 60 in our 90-day SAT Prep series. Today what you'll be doing is you'll be focusing on the reading section for today. So we're not going to be doing anything with math or with writing today. Today we'll be solely focused on working with pacing in the reading section. So as you know, we've been working on pacing for the last couple of weeks. We're going to go ahead and continue that today. So today what you'll be doing is you'll be doing the fourth and the fifth passages from SAT Practice Test 4 with a focus on pacing. So that means that you're going to want to finish each of those passages in right around 9 minutes to 11 minutes, skipping no more than 3 questions. Keep in mind that if you are skipping 3 questions, you should be finishing in right around 9 minutes. If you aren't skipping any questions, you should be finishing in right around 11 minutes. So try to stay in that window. So what will happen here today is you're going to start by doing passage 4 from SAT Practice Test 4. So just look up SAT Practice Test 4 in Google. You can click on the PDF, and what will happen here is I'll start a timer, and you'll have 11 minutes then to go through, answer as many questions as you can for that passage. So in this case, it'll be passage 4. So you'll answer all the questions that you can, and then at the end of that 11 minutes, then I'll go ahead and do a pacing walkthrough of what I would do if I were taking that fourth passage of SAT Practice Test 4 myself. So I will go through it, use the pacing that I recommend. I'll answer all the questions, and then at that point, obviously, I'll get that done in under 11 minutes. Then you'll move on and do passage 5 by yourself, and then you'll go ahead and check it against what I do after that. So once again, you'll have 11 minutes to do passage 5, and then I'll go through and complete that in 11 minutes as well. So you'll be able to check your answers, see how you're getting to the correct answer or how you're getting to the incorrect answer versus how I'm getting to the correct answer. Compare those two things, compare your pacing to my pacing. Keep in mind that when you read the passage, you should be reading in anywhere from 3 to 3.5 minutes ideally, but try to for sure be under 4 minutes. Now, passage 4 in SAT Practice Test 4, it is a 2-passage problem, so it's going to have one passage and then another passage, which means what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to read that first passage as we talked about right around a month ago or a few weeks ago. You want to read that first passage, answer all the questions on the first passage, then read the second passage, answer all the questions on the second passage, and then after that, answer the questions on both. So in that scenario, you're not really going to be watching the clock to make sure you're reading the whole thing in under 3 minutes because you are splitting it up like that. So you will be wanting to read passage 1 first, answering the questions on passage 1, then reading passage 2, answering those questions on passage 2, and then finally answering questions that relate to both of them. And then passage 5 is not a 2-passage one. So for passage 5, you're going to want to make sure that you get through your initial read through in right around 3 minutes to 3.5 minutes ideally, but at the most under 4 minutes. So with that, in about 10 seconds here, a timer will start for 11 minutes, right? So you'll just see a message pop up on your screen that'll say your time has started. And then at the end of that 11 minutes, I'll tell you that your time is up. So make sure that you have SAT Practice Test 4 pulled up as a PDF, either in another window or on your screen right now, or print it off if you want to print it off. And with that, you're going to go ahead and get started in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Your 11 minutes is now up. At this point, I will go ahead and do a walkthrough of questions 32 to 41 of passage 4 from SAT Practice Test 4. So you'll be able to check your answers as I go through. I'll be giving the correct answers, answer explanations for why things are correct, while at the same time finishing in under that 11 minutes. That way you can see the pacing that I use and the pacing that I recommend and the pacing strategy. So with that, at this point, what you're going to want to do is make sure you have obviously all your answers down on a piece of paper so you can check if they're correct or incorrect. And at this point, I will go ahead and get into my walkthrough. So pay attention to both how I pace and how I get to the correct answer as well. Questions 32 to 41 are based on the following passages. Passage 1 is adopted from Edmund Burke, titled Reflections on the Revolution in France, originally published in 1790. Passage 2 is adopted from Thomas Paine, titled The Rights of Man, originally published in 1791. So since this is a two-passage problem, what I'll do is I'll read the first passage first. I'll answer the questions that are related to the first passage only. Then I'll read the second passage and answer those questions related to the second passage. And then after that, answer the questions that are related to both of them. So passage 1, to avoid the evils of inconsistency and versatility 10,000 times worse than those of obstinacy and the blindest prejudice, we have consecrated the state that no man should approach to look into its defects or corruptions without due caution, or with due caution. That he should never dream of beginning its reformation by its subversion, that he should approach to the faults of the state as to the wounds of a father with pious awe and trembling solicitude. By this wise prejudice we are taught to look with horror on those children of their country who are prompt rashly to hack that aged parent in pieces and put him into the kettle of magicians, in hopes that by their poisonous weeds and wild incantations they may regenerate the paternal constitution and renovate their father's life. Society is indeed a contract. Subordinate contracts for objects of mere occasional interest may be dissolved at pleasure, but the state ought not to be considered as nothing better than a partnership agreement in a trade of pepper and coffee, calico or tobacco, or some other such low concern, to be taken up for a little temporary interest, and to be dissolved by the fancy of parties. It is not to be looked upon with other reverence, because it is not a partnership in things subservient only to the gross animal existence of a temporary and perishable nature. It is a partnership in all science, a partnership in all art, a partnership in every virtue, in all perfection. As the end of such a partnership cannot be obtained in many generations, it becomes a partnership not only between those who are living, but between those who are living and those who are dead, those who are to be born. The municipal corporations at the universal kingdom are not morally at liberty at their pleasure, and their speculations of a contingent improvement wholly to separate and tear asunder the bands of their subordinate community, and to dissolve it into an unsocial, uncivil, unconnected chaos of elementary principles. All right, so that's the end of passage 1. So at this point, I'll go ahead and answer the questions related to passage 1. So we have question 32. We have in passage 1, Burke indicates that a contrast between a person and a society differs from other contracts mainly in what? Well, we know that in that passage, or that first passage, what he's really doing is he's talking about how other contracts, they are less serious, right? So we look at option D, the other contracts that aren't with the government between people and society, they aren't as serious and they also are less permanent. Okay, we can see where he makes that comparison if we quick go up. I believe I highlighted this. We talk about how such partnerships cannot be obtained in many generations, right? Therefore, they last a very, very long time. They're between those who are living, those who are dead, and those who to be born. So that shows it's permanent, right? It lasts many generations. We also see that it's not of a low concern up here. So we know that it's important, it's serious, and it's also permanence. So our answer there would be D, serious and permanent. That's what makes it differ between other contracts. Okay, as used in line 4, state most nearly refers to what? So we have line 4, the word is state. Let's go take a look at what that's going to refer to. So we have line 4. Okay, we have to avoid the evils of inconsistency and versatility 10,000 times worse than those of obstinacy and the blindest prejudice. We have consecrated the state. Okay, I know that in this case we're referring to something to do with the government and politics, that no man should approach to look into its defects or corruptions, but with due caution. So in this case, state is really referring to a political entity. We're not talking about position in life or a temporary condition or a style of living. We need to be talking about something to do with government and with politics. In this case, political entity would be correct. So our answer for 33 would be D. All right, well, now we got question 34. We have, as used in line 22, low most nearly means what? Let's go take a look at line 22. We have, or some other such low concern. Okay, in this case, we'd be looking at something like an insignificant concern or a petty concern, something that shows that it's not really worth worrying over. So we don't have the word insignificant, but we do have the word petty. We wouldn't describe it as weak concern or an inadequate concern or a depleted concern. We would describe it as a petty concern or something that's not significant. So answer there would be A for 34. 35, it can be most recently inferred from passage 2. Okay, I see now I'm referring to passage 2, so at this point I read passage 2. So I'll go up, it's going to be on our screen right here. We have every age and generation must be as free to act for itself in all cases as the ages and generations which preceded it. The vanity and presumption of governing before the grave is the most ridiculous and insolent of all tyrannies. Man has no property in man, neither has any generation a property in the generations which are to follow. The Parliament or the people of 1688 or of any other period had no more right to dispose of the people of the present day or to bind or to control them in any shape whatsoever than the Parliament or the people of the present day have to dispose of, bind, or control those who are to live 100 or 1,000 years hence. Every generation is and must be competent to all purposes which its occasions require. It is to the living and not to the dead, so it's to the living and not to the dead that there are to be accommodated. When man ceases to be, his power and his wants cease with him, and having no longer any participation in the concerns of the world, he has no longer any authority in directing who shall be its governors, or how its government shall be organized, or how administered. Those who have quitted the world and those who are not yet arrived in it are as far remote from each other and are as the utmost stretch of mortal imagination can conceive. What possible obligation then can exist between them? What rule or principle can be laid down that two non-entities, the one out of existence and the other not in, and who never can meet in this world, that the one should control the other to the end of time? The circumstances of the world are continually changing, the opinions of men change also, and as government is for the living and not for the dead, it is the living only that has any right in it. That which may be thought right and found convenient in one age may be thought wrong and found inconvenient in another. In such cases, who is to decide, the living or the dead? Okay, at this point, we can answer the questions relating to passage 2. So we have 35. It can be most reasonably inferred from passage 2 that Paine views historical precedent as what? Well, he's saying historical precedents don't matter to the people who are currently living, because those who are dead, they have no stake in what is going on now because it's not involving them. It does not concern them. It does not affect them. So we're going to look for an answer choice that discusses that. So we have option A, generally helpful to those who want to change society. No, he's not saying it's generally helpful to those who want to change society. B, surprisingly difficult for many people to comprehend. Also incorrect. C, frequently responsible for human progress. No. D, largely irrelevant to current political discussions. Yes. He says what occurred in the past and what people who are dead thought does not matter now because it doesn't affect them. So the answer there would be D. All right, now we got question 36. How would Paine most likely respond to Burke's statement in lines 30 to 34 from passage 1? Well, let's take a look at that statement. So it's lines 30 to 34. We have, as the ends of such a partnership cannot be obtained in many generations, it becomes a partnership not only between those who are living, but between those who are living, dead, and unborn. Okay, well, that's saying that that partnership or that agreement exists across generations. And we know in passage 2, which is the passage where Paine is making his argument, we know that we absolutely disagree with that. So we're going to look for something that shows disagreement. So we have option A. He would assert that the notion of a partnership across generations is less plausible to the people of his era than to the people of the past. The problem with this is that he's saying it's less plausible to those of his era than those in the past. That's what makes that wrong. B. He would argue that there is no politically meaningful links between the dead, the living, and the unborn. Yes, that would be his argument there. He believes that there is no agreement between the two or no meaningful links between those groups because only one is actually living in that moment and only one has those things affect them. So the correct answer there would be option B. All right, now we got question 37. So we got 37. Which choice provides the best evidence to the previous question? Okay, that one's easy because we already have a good idea of where that's going to be at. That's going to be towards the end of the second passage because obviously it would be in passage 2 because we're responding to passage 1. And that's going to be where we talk about how we have right here where we have this highlighted portion from right around, looks like 67 to right around 72. What possible obligation then can exist between them? So he's saying that there's no meaningful links between them. What rule or principle can be laid down that two non-entities, that one out of existence, the other not in, who can never meet in this world should control each other to the end of time? So that's 67 to 72 would be our best evidence there. We see that's option D for 37, so that would be our answer there because that's showing there's no meaningful links between them. Okay, 38, which choice best describes how Burke would most likely have reacted to Paine's arguments in the final paragraph of passage 2. When we know in the final paragraph of passage 2, Paine is arguing that there's really obviously no meaningful links between the three groups. He's arguing that the government is for the living, not for the dead, not for the people who are to come. Only the living has any right in it. So how would the author of passage 1 respond to that? Well, he wouldn't agree with it. Okay, so we can get rid of with approval. Now, he wouldn't We wouldn't say with skepticism because he would obviously disagree with it. We also wouldn't say with resignation, so our answer would have to be D. He would respond with disapproval because changing conditions are not a sufficient justification for changing the form of government. And we hear the author of passage 1 say that as well, so that also supports it. But he would definitely respond with disapproval, so our answer there would be D for 38. All right, 39, which choice provides the best evidence to the previous question? Okay, we know that that's going to be, if we scroll up here, that's going to be right here where we talk, and it looks like right around 30 to 34, I believe. Let me see if that was, I think it might have been 34 to 38. That was our only option around there. Okay, our only option around there is 34 to 38. So let me take a look at that. Okay, I always look at the highlighted portions first because generally those are things that are important, so they're generally evidence. But let's take a look at this. The municipal corporations of that universal kingdom are not morally at liberty at their pleasure and on their speculations of a contingent improvement, wholly to separate and tear asunder the bands of the subordinate community and to dissolve it into unsocial, uncivil, connected chaos of elementary principles. Okay, the key part here in 34 to 38 that's going to make it correct is because we talk about how people in the present can't speculate on contingent improvement, right? Because they can't separate and tear asunder the bands of the subordinate community or the previous community. So what it's saying here is it's saying that those who are living now, they can't speculate on something improving and use that as justification to end what occurred in the past. So our correct answer there would be those lines 34 to 38. All right, question 40. Which choice best states the relationship between the two passages? Well, we know passage 2 is challenging that primary argument of passage 1. Passage 2 is saying that there is no link between those three groups, the present, the dead, and the unborn. So passage 2 is definitely challenging that. So 40 answer there would be A. 41, the main purpose of both passages is to do what? Both passages, they're both talking about that relationship between people and government. They're not suggesting a way to resolve a particular political struggle. They're not evaluating a consequence of rapid political change. And they're not describing duties government have to their citizens. They're discussing a relationship between people and their government. All right, so now we can go ahead and move on. We've got our next passage, which is right here. We got passage 5. So that ends the explanation of that fourth passage from SAT Practice Test 4. At this point, we're going to go ahead and move into that fifth passage from SAT Practice Test 4. So once again, you'll have 11 minutes to complete that fifth passage. So you're going to want to make sure you have that PDF pulled up on your computer or print it off if you would like to do that so you can annotate it. Now, keep in mind, once again, obviously 11 minutes, so make sure that you're trying to skip at most 3, okay? So try not to skip any more than 3. Ideally, you wouldn't skip any, but if you do have to skip some, don't skip more than 3, because if you're skipping more than 3 and you're taking 9 minutes or 11 minutes, you're going to end up running out of time and not going to have time to go back and answer those. So the most that you should be skipping in this is definitely 3, and if you are skipping 3, make sure you're finishing in 9 minutes rather than 11. If you're not skipping any and you're getting it done in 9, or 10 or 11, you're doing a really, really good job. So congratulations on that. If you're only skipping 1 and you're finishing in 10 minutes, that's perfectly fine as well. So with that, you're going to have passage 5, SAT Practice Test 4. That's only one passage, it's not 2, so make sure you're trying to finish reading it in anywhere from 3 to 3.5 minutes or at most 4 minutes. So with that, you're going to go ahead and get started with that in about 5 seconds. So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, your time is now up for the SAT reading section for that fifth passage of SAT Practice Test 4. At this point, I will go ahead and do a walkthrough where you'll be able to correct your answers that you had for this fifth passage. You'll be able to see what you got correct, what you got incorrect, how I get to the correct answer, why the correct answer is correct. You'll also be able to compare your pacing to mine. So obviously I'll be reading this in under 4 minutes for sure, ideally between 3 and 3.5 minutes, highlighting things that I see as important as I go through, which you would be underlining if you're taking this paper and pencil. If you're watching this a year from now and the SAT is online, then I would imagine they have some underline feature or highlight feature you can use as you read through the text, or you can just kind of maybe jot down some line numbers as you're going through. If you have paper out and they're letting that happen on the digital version, I don't know. But with that, at this point, we're going to go ahead and switch over and we'll do my walkthrough of this in under 11 minutes of this passage and answer explanations. So that'll start here in 3, 2, 1. Questions 42 to 52 are based on the following passage and supplementary material. This passage is adopted from Caroline Gramlin, source of mysterious medieval eruption identified, copyright 2013 by the American Association for the Advancement of Science. About 750 years ago, a powerful volcano erupted somewhere on Earth, kicking off a centuries-long cold snap known as the Little Ice Age. Identifying the volcano responsible has been tricky. That a powerful volcano erupted somewhere in the world sometime in the Middle Ages is written in the polar ice cores in the forms of layers of sulfate deposits and tiny shards of volcanic glass. These cores suggest that the amount of sulfur the mystery volcano sent into the stratosphere put it firmly among the ranks of the strongest climate-perturbing eruptions of the current geological epoch, the Holocene, a period that stretches from 10,000 years ago to the present. A haze of stratospheric sulfur cools the climate by reflecting solar energy back into space. In 2012, a team of scientists led by geochemist Gifford Miller strengthened the link between the mystery eruption and the onset of the Little Ice Age by using radiocarbon dating of dead plant material from beneath ice caps on Baffin Island, Iceland, as well as ice and sediment core data to determine that the cold summers and ice growth began abruptly between 1275 and 1300 CE and became intensified between 1430 and 1445 CE. Such a sudden onset pointed to a huge volcanic eruption, injecting sulfur into the stratosphere and starting the cooling. Subsequent unusually large and frequent eruptions of other volcanoes, as well as sea ice, ocean feedbacks, persisting long after the aerosols have been removed from the atmosphere, may have prolonged the cooling through the 1700s. Volcanologist Frank Levine and colleagues now think they've identified the volcano in question, Indonesia's Samalas. One line of evidence they note is historical records. According to the Babad Lombok, records of the island written on palm leaves and Old Javanese, Samalas erupted catastrophically before the end of the 13th century, devastating surrounding villages, including Lombok's capital at the time, Pamatan, with ash and fast-moving sweeps of hot rock and glass called pyroclastic flows. The researchers then began to reconstruct the formation of the large 800-meter deep caldera, a basin-shaped volcanic crater that now sits atop a volcano. They examined 130 outcrops on the flanks of the volcano, exposing sequences of pumice ash hardened into rock and other pyroclastic material. The volume of the ash deposited and the estimated height of the eruption plume, 43 kilometers above sea level, put the eruption's magnitude at a minimum of 7 on the volcanic explosivity index, which has a scale of 1 to 8, making it one of the largest known in the Holocene. The team also performed radiocarbon analysis on the carbonized tree trunks and branches buried within the pyroclastic deposits to confirm the date of the eruption. It could not, they concluded, have happened before 1257 and certainly happened in the 13th century. It's not a total surprise that an Indonesian volcano might be the source of the eruption, Miller says. An equatorial eruption is more consistent with the apparent climate impacts, and he adds, with sulfate appearing in both polar ice caps, Arctic and Antarctic, there is strong consensus that this also supports an equatorial source. Another possible candidate, both in terms of timing and geographic location, is Ecuador's Quilotila, estimated to have last erupted between 1147 and 1320 CE. But when Levine's team examined shards of volcanic glass from this volcano, they found that they didn't match the chemical composition of the glass found in polar ice cores, whereas Samala glass is a much closer match. That, they suggest, further strengthens the case that Samala was responsible for the medieval year without summer in 1258 CE. Alright, at this point we can go ahead and get into our questions. So we've got a figure, which will probably be asked at the end because they almost always are. We have the main purpose of the passage is to do what? Okay, well we know that we start out our passage by discussing this sort of little ice age, and then we get into the cause of that after. Okay, so the main purpose in this is really to describe the evidence that is linking the volcano Samalas to the Little Ice Age, right? The Little Ice Age is what we introduce, but then at the end we really start talking about the cause of it, which we know is the volcano Samalas, or at least that's what the evidence is pointing to. We aren't describing periods in Earth's recent geological history. That's not the whole point of this. We want to keep in mind we're looking for the main purpose. Explaining the methods scientists use in radiocarbon analysis, we aren't explaining those methods. Explaining how volcanic glass forms during volcanic eruptions, we do not do that either. So our answer is C for 42. All right, 43, over the course of the passage, the focus shifts from what? Well, as I said in part 1, we shift from describing this record event, right, this little ice age, to its likely cause. So our answer there would be B. Okay, we start by introducing this little ice age period, and then we get into its cause being those Samalas volcanoes. Okay, we're not starting with a criticism, so that's wrong. We're not starting with the use of ice core samples to a new method. We're not doing that. We're not starting with the use of radiocarbon dating either. We're starting with that description of the little ice age and then moving on to its cause. All right, now we got 44, so we have which choice is providing the best evidence for that previous answer. So we're going to look for where we start to make that transition from description of the little ice age to its cause. I believe that it's going to be right around here. Let me take a look. So we have in 2012, this is kind of where we started to make this transition. I'm going to put it in green. So in 2012, a team of scientists led by geochemist Gifford Miller strengthened the link between the mystery eruption. Okay, so we're linking the mystery eruption and the onset of the little ice age. So that's its cause, right? The mystery eruption is its cause, and our event is the little ice age. So our evidence then should be from, looks like 17 to right around wherever the sentence ends, which is in 24, but we might not end up going all the way there. So anything that's really got 17 to 19 for sure in it would be what I'm looking at for my evidence there. So I see I do go all the way to 25 because that's the end of my sentence. My answer there would be A for number 44. All right, now we got question 45. So we've got the author uses the phrase is written in line 6, most likely to do what? Well, let's go take a look at the word in written in line 6. So we have, I believe it was talking about the answers are written in, right? We have that a powerful volcano erupted somewhere in the world sometime in the Middle Ages is written in polar ice cores, okay, or is evident in polar ice cores is what I'm looking at there. It's showing that the evidence there is in those polar ice cores. So let's look for an answer that has that. So we have option C underscores the sense of importance that they have regarding their work. That's incorrect. D, reinforcing the idea that the evidence is there and can be interpreted by scientists. That will for sure be our answer, right? Us saying that the evidence is written in something is telling us that the evidence is both there and that it can be interpreted by scientists to come to a conclusion. So our answer there would have to be D. All right, now we got 45. We have, where does the author indicate the medieval volcanic eruption was probably located? Okay, we say this one pretty explicitly. We say that it's near the equator in Indonesia. I see my next question is evidence, so I can also go ahead and get the evidence for you on that one. Okay, we know that our evidence for where it says near the equator in Indonesia, we're just going to look for where it says that because it pretty much explicitly says that. We see that it's not a total surprise an Indonesian volcano might be the source of the eruption, and equatorial eruption is more consistent with the apparent climate impacts. So I see that that's going to be from 61 then to 64. Okay, so I'm going to find evidence, see if that's an option. Okay, I see that that is a choice, so my answer there would be D because that would be showing that it happened near the equator in Indonesia. That one right there is pretty explicit. All right, now we have, as used in line 68, the phrase another possible candidate implies what? Well, let's go take a look at line 68, find some context. So we have appearing in both polar ice caps, Arctic and Antarctic, there's a strong consensus that this also supports an equatorial source. Another possible candidate, both in terms of timing and geographic location, is Ecuador's Kilo Tias. This is another possible candidate for the cause of the little ice age. So it's really showing that there are, it's not for sure known which one caused it, what I would say we're really looking at here. So let's take a look through our options. We have A, powerful volcanic eruptions occur frequently. No, that's not really the main point. The main point is that we know that there's other options for what caused this. We have B, the effects of volcanic eruptions can last for centuries, also incorrect. C, scientists know of other volcanoes that erupted during the Middle Ages. Yes, those other volcanoes erupting during the Middle Ages, like we talk about as in that other possible candidate, is showing that there's some other volcano that could have caused this little ice age. So it's showing that there are others that erupted during those Middle Ages. Other volcanoes have calderas that are very large. No, that would be, if you were to focus too narrow on the calderas part of this passage. All right, now we got which choice best supports the claim that Kiotia was not responsible for the ice age. Okay, the big thing that sticks out to me right here is the word closer match, so I'm going to start there in 71 to 75 because that's probably telling me that there's another volcano that is at a closer match, which I believe is what it says. We have, but when Levine's team examined shards of volcanic glass from this volcano, they found they didn't match the chemical composition of the glass found in polar ice cores, whereas the Samalas glass is a much closer match. I see that that's from, it looks like 71 down to 75, it looks like right here. So down 71 to 75. Find an answer choice that has that. So we got 71 to 75. That's going to be D for 49. All right, so now at this point we've got question 50. According to the data in the figure, the greatest below average temperature variation occurred around what year? Well, let's go take a look for that greatest below average temperature variation. I see that occurs here. That's my greatest decrease, or the lowest point. That's going to be at 16, it looks like 16, just before 1700, so right around 1670-ish is what I'd be looking at as an answer choice there. I see that I got 1675, so my answer would be C for number 50. All right, at this point, we go and move on to number 51. 51 says, the passage and the figure are in agreement that the onset of the Little Ice Age began when? Okay, well, let's take a look at this figure. So we have the onset of the Little Ice Age. We see that that's going to really start right around here, right? If we go down, that's where we move from that medieval warm period into this Little Ice Age over here. So that's going to be right around just before 1400. It's right around 1350 to 1400 is what I'd be looking at there. So let's take a look. We've got option A around 1150, no, just before 1300. I mean, it looks like according to the figure that it would be a little bit closer to that 1350 mark, but also, you know, we see that we do start that decline just before 1300 as well. So starting that decline just before 1300, that also would work. So our answer there should be B, just before 1300. That's a better choice than just before 1500 and around 1650. So our answer would be B for 51. All right, now we got 52, which statement's best supported by the data in the figure. At this point, we just got to go through our statements, starting with A. So we have the greatest cooling during the Little Ice Age occurred hundreds of years after the temperature peaks of the medieval warm period. Well, let's take a look. We see that our peaks in the medieval warm period occur right around 1200. So we go from right around 1200 to our greatest trough, or our greatest decline, which is right around 1650. So that is hundreds of years after, so therefore my answer would have to be A for number 52, because that is a true statement that's supported by the data presented in the figure. So my answer would be A for 52.